Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well today. And yes, I do have a superhero mask band thing over my face. Please disregard. It's not always easy to find a suitable lighted area, and I don't feel like driving around till I find one, so that's what it is. That's what it's going to be. Beautiful sunset here today in Florida. Anyway, I've had a few friends ask me recently what my thoughts are regarding Christmas because they know that I'm Jewish. I'm not a Christian, though some people accuse me as such. And so I thought instead of writing a long essay to each one individually, this is an easier way to do it and give you a chance to see me with this beautiful band over my face. So, what are my thoughts? Um, Even before I converted to Judaism, I had I always loved Christmas. I loved the atmosphere of it. I loved the smells of the Christmas trees. And I say this to let people know that anything I say that you may find offensive or um, challenging in this video, it's not due to any sort of inherent bias toward Christmas that I harbor. To the contrary, it's probably, as far as just my own personal enjoyment, it was probably my favorite holiday growing up. That said, even before I converted to Judaism, I was kind of troubled by Christmas. One, by the uh, distractions of the original meaning of Christmas, the birth of Jesus, the nativity story, the central message that is supposed to be part and parcel to Christmas is often, and I noticed this even in childhood, uh, kind of overshadowed by the marketing and Santa characters, elves, and many stories that, while they may be cute, really do distract from the main point of Christmas. And it is possible to provide children's stories, cartoons, Christmas movies that focus on the actual message of Christmas and the original story of Christmas without without it being boring. It could be entertaining, especially if there was enough demand for it. Hollywood would find a way. But yeah, I noticed that growing up, and that bothered me. Then as I was a little older and reading more, I learned that there seemed to be pagan roots to Christianity, not to to Christmas, apparently. Though upon further research as an adult, I'm not as convinced that all of these customs came from ancient paganism per se. But what I wanted to say, one of the main things I wanted to say in this video is that one of my favorite teachings that I came across in reading certain parts of ancient Jewish literature that also get neglected was the teaching of the son of the Rambam, the son of Maimonides, where he's referring. He was also actually often accused of borrowing from the practices of Muslims, who some people even today claim come from idolatry. Whether or not that's the case, or to what extent, is a whole different topic. But he was accused of that because he was trying to revive certain practices of the Jewish people that Jews had long neglected, that Muslims happen to preserve in some form or another. So he was accused of that. And in dealing with the question of the customs of idolaters and of the nations, he stated that the people of Israel, while God has commanded his people to separate from the nations, and we're not to walk in their customs. If you stop and think about it, you should be able to understand this even yourself, but alas, plenty of us are stubborn. That includes me at times. I try to overcome it, and I think I do make progress at times. So the son of the Rambam, he stated that the prohibition of walking in the customs of idolaters is not a blanket prohibition. We are not prohibited from adopting practices or customs of idolaters that make sense, things that are logical. It's not a general prohibition. We are prohibited from adopting the irrational customs of idolaters, and of course, anything directly that would directly entail serving idolatry. So, long story short, since we're already at 5 minutes, is that even if I keep saying Christianity, even if Christmas has some kind of origins in the customs of Christmas, some sort of origins in ancient paganism, one, these customs are not acts of worship to an idol. So you don't have the issue of actual idol worship. If the custom is done, that specific custom is done by you or by someone, and they are doing it specifically as an act of worship to baby Jesus or to a statue of baby Jesus, something like that, then yes, you can have the question of this may actually be a custom of idolatry. But for the most part, that's not what's happening. And if that is what's happening, you will probably know it. The vast majority of cases, that's not what's happening. So then you have the question of, is it a problem that maybe theoretically these customs originated from pre-Christian idolatry, and even though it's divorced from idolatry, and you're not actually doing an act of idolatrous worship, but the mere fact that it originated from idolatry in some way or another could make it problematic. And for that also, I would say, going back to the words of the son of the Rambam that I personally find very convincing, rational, and that is that even if that were the case, if it's a logical practice, if it's not irrational, not harmful, then it's permitted. Doesn't matter that Christians do it if you are a Jew or a Muslim concerned about that. It doesn't matter. If it's not harmful, it's not an actual act of idolatry, not worshiping a statue, what's the problem? It's just simply your own personal aversion. And I can sympathize and maybe even share some of those aversions, but objectively speaking, there's no issue. And really, after putting some thought into it, I think that it is very reasonable, many of these customs. And the parts of the world that many of these customs arose, in the dead of winter, everything looks bland, everything is dying and cold and basically miserable. It makes sense to create some kind of holiday in the middle of it to give light in the darkness. It's often the darkest, at least in the northern hemisphere, it's the darkest time of the year. So bring some light into it. When everything's dead outside, bring in an evergreen. It has a fresh fragrance. Put lights on it. Bring some light into the darkness. I don't find anything wrong with that. Turn the cold, darkest, saddest, gloomiest time of the year into an opportunity for celebration. Bring family and talk about the light within the Christian narrative, within the narrative of the Gospels, instead of being focused on depression. And it's well known that such circumstances, hard circumstances, constant nightfall can be depressing. Instead of dwelling on that and letting it overcome you, focus on a positive message. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I'm very pro-Christmas. I'm very pro-Christmas. No shame. I feel zero shame, even as a Jew who is not a Christian, in saying that. But there is there are some issues that I have with Christmas, and it's not with the beautiful customs, but rather with many passages in the Hebrew Bible that are quoted as support for certain Christian theological ideas, certain ideas that not all Christians believe, but the mainstream do believe. And I grew up with many of these verses, and they were very central to my own personal Christian theology when I was a Christian. And with, again, just as with the customs of Christmas, without any sort of chip on my shoulder towards these beliefs. I was actually a very zealous promoter of these ideas, without seeking to destroy them, without any anger about these certain theological beliefs. Yet, as I increased my knowledge of Hebrew, the original underlying language of the Hebrew Bible, some of these beliefs fell away, not because I chose or wanted to get rid of them, but simply because I began looking at these verses in the original language and realized that many of the mainstream translations of several popular verses that are quoted around this time of year are very biasly translated. I have no animosity towards Christians who quote these erroneous and misleading translations and believe them and share them, because the overwhelming majority of people who do so have no idea that they are mistranslations, and they are not quoting or spreading these things in malice. But I would say, and this is a problem that I've had for a long time, I would say that pastors, priests, preachers, people who make it their living, basically, to teach people the Bible, they should make it a priority to become fluent in the biblical languages. At least try. And I'm not talking about just opening up a concordance on occasion or a lexicon and learning one or two words and then presenting it to your congregants as if you know what you're talking about. You do have to start somewhere, but actually put some effort into it. I mean, it's the least you can do if that's what your income is coming from. Invest some time in actually mastering the language. I don't want to force feed you, spoon feed you, that your beliefs are wrong. I encourage you just learn the language and keep studying. And you may not ultimately come to the same views that I have, but I assure you that some of your views in one way or another are going to change when you increase in knowledge of the original language of the Bible. And I think that's the responsibility of any pastor, priest, preacher, to whom myriads of people are turning to as an authority on their faith and the Hebrew and the Holy Bible. And I encourage every Christian to encourage your pastors, your priests, your preachers to do the same. And don't be misled, don't be fooled that just because they are able to quote or refer to a certain Hebrew word or Greek word, that means they know Greek or Hebrew. 99% or more of pastors and priests do not know the biblical languages, even though they may be able to say a small handful of words in Greek or Hebrew. That's not the same as knowing the language, knowing the grammar, and so forth. So that is my only beef that I have to share here. But everything else, I find the nativity story inspiring, and the Christmas message and season in general is beautiful. And that has nothing to do with the certain aspects of mainstream Christian theology that the Jewish people and the Jewish faith has historically found problematic. In that regard, I am in the Jewish tradition, I'm in line with it, but I also am able to separate between problematic beliefs that certain Christians hold to and the season and the original nativity story, which is distinct and stands on its own. That said, I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and I hope that just as you love and celebrate this time of year, that you will also find interest in other holidays that you may not be familiar with, which, unlike Christmas, God actually commanded in His holy word. That's it. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Yalla bye.